What is RadioShack or radio crypto and why is it rising?
In 1999, 95% of Americans lived within 5 minutes of a Radio Shack. With 7,000 locations, it was the neighborhood's front door to the digital revolution. Today, every one of those 7,000 stores is gone. And the company's final act wasn't selling electronics. It was a $112 million fraud charge filed by the SEC. How does a company spend 60 years teaching a generation how to build their own computers, only to end its life as a crypto token trading for less than the price of a used car? To understand the fall, you have to look past the empty shelves and into a single spreadsheet decision made in 1993. This is Sector Down. In 1963, Charles Tandy bought a nearly bankrupt 9-store radio parts chain in Boston for $300,000 cash. He was a leather goods man from Fort Worth. He had never sold a transistor in his life. What he understood was inventory discipline. He cut RadioShack's stock from 40,000 items down to 2,500. He killed the mail-order credit business that was drowning the company in unpaid bills. And then he did something that would define the company for the next 2 decades. He started making the products himself. Realistic stereos, Archer antennas, micronta test equipment. If RadioShack sold it, more often than not, RadioShack built it. Walk into a RadioShack in the 1970s and the first thing you noticed was the wall behind the counter. Hundreds of small drawers, each one holding a different resistor, a different capacitor, a different connector you couldn't find anywhere else within 50 miles. The smell of solder and warm electronics hung in the air. A clerk who could tell you exactly which part you needed, because he had probably fixed the same radio himself, twice. By the late 1970s, that vertical integration had turned a Boston ham radio shop into something nobody saw coming. In 1977, RadioShack released the TRS-80, one of the first mass-produced, fully assembled personal computers on the market. It cost $599. Apple's comparable machine cost $1,298. RadioShack sold over 100,000 of them in the first year. For a few unlikely years, a company best known for batteries and CB radios was arguably the most important computer manufacturer on Earth. Walk into any RadioShack in 1978 and you were walking into the front edge of the personal computing revolution. The future for once had a return address, and it was a strip mall. Nobody knew it would not last. The year is 1993. RadioShack is still dominant. The stores are profitable. The vertical integration built by Charles Tandy 30 years earlier is still working exactly as designed. Factories feeding stores, stores feeding profit. No middleman in between. Then leadership makes one decision. In a move to boost short-term profits, the company sells off nearly all of its manufacturing operations. The factories that built Realistic, Archer, and Micronta are gone. The proprietary brands that had defined RadioShack on every shelf are discontinued. On the balance sheet, the math is simple. Outsourcing is cheaper. Nobody asks what it costs to stop making the products that made RadioShack RadioShack. The warning sign was already there, a decade earlier, when the proprietary TRS-80 Model 2000 couldn't run IBM software and barely sold. But that was a symptom. This was the disease. This is the fatal decision. Not gradual decline, not strategic drift. 1 year, one spreadsheet, one vote in a boardroom that turned a manufacturer into a middleman. They gave up their greatest advantage to become just another middleman. It was the first step off the cliff, even though they didn't know it yet. By the late 1990s, RadioShack had found a new lifeline, and it looked for a while like salvation. Cell phones. The carriers needed storefronts. RadioShack had 7,000 of them in nearly every strip mall in America. Deals with Sprint, Verizon, AT&T turned every location into a phone store, and the commissions were enormous. The stock soared. By 1999, shares hit a peak of $76.77, up from under $20 a year earlier. Investors who'd watched the company fumble through computers and furniture and electronics megastores finally had a reason to cheer. RadioShack had found its next act. But look closer at what that act required. To sell phones, RadioShack needed floor space, and floor space is finite. The aisles of resistors, capacitors, soldering irons, the parts bins that had made the store a second home for hobbyists and tinkerers for 3 decades, those aisles started shrinking, quietly, section by section. Nobody announced it. Nobody mourned it in a press release. The DIY customer who had built the company's reputation, the kid building a crystal radio, the ham operator restocking on connectors, started walking into a store that no longer had what they needed. They didn't complain. They just stopped coming back. Here's the version of this story that could have happened. RadioShack keeps its hobbyist soul as a smaller, profitable core and treats the phone boom as a second revenue stream instead of a replacement identity. That version exists in a parallel universe. It is not the one anyone got to live in. The phone money was real. The cost of it wouldn't show up on a balance sheet for years. By the time it did, there would be nothing left underneath to fall back on. In January 2007, Steve Jobs walked on stage in San Francisco and introduced a phone that was also a camera, a GPS, a voice recorder, a calculator, a music player, and a flashlight. Every one of those was a category RadioShack had spent decades selling pieces of. The iPhone didn't compete with one RadioShack product line. It swallowed 5 of them at once. Worse than the device itself was what it revealed to the carriers. AT&T and Verizon had spent a decade paying RadioShack commissions to put phones in customers' hands. Now they realized something simple and brutal. They didn't need a middleman with 7,000 aging storefronts. They could open their own stores, sleeker, better staffed for the new product, carrying their own name on the door. And they did. RadioShack had tied its entire second act to partners who, the moment it became convenient, treated the partnership as disposable. There was no malice in it. It was just business. A retailer that makes itself dependent on someone else's product line is a retailer renting its own future. RadioShack had simply made itself replaceable, and the world replaced it. What followed was a decade of decisions that each looked reasonable in a boardroom and devastating in sequence. Close, underperforming stores, but not enough to fix the cost structure. Cut staff, but lose the institutional knowledge that made the in-store experience worth anything. Chase a new product category, mobile accessories, drones, smart home gadgets, only to find Best Buy and Amazon already there with better selection and lower prices. The spiritual cost showed up before the financial one did. Employees who'd once prided themselves on knowing how to wire a circuit or troubleshoot a stereo were now commission-driven phone salespeople working a script. The store stopped being a place where you learned something. It became a place you passed through on your way to a contract renewal. By 2010, and the years just after, RadioShack was a company without a center of gravity. Not quite an electronics retailer, not quite a phone store, not quite anything a customer could describe in one sentence. It had spent its inheritance on a bet that the carriers needed it forever. They didn't. They never had. RadioShack had been useful right up until the moment it wasn't, and nobody on the other side of that relationship felt any obligation to say so out loud. In 2009, the company tried to rebrand itself The Shack, a casual nickname pushed into official use. It didn't take. Within a few years, the name quietly reverted. 5 years later, RadioShack tried again, this time with self-awareness instead of denial. The 2014 Super Bowl ad showed 1980s icons, Hulk Hogan, Alf, Eric Estrada, ransacking a dated-looking RadioShack store, then revealed a sleek, modern one underneath. The 80s called. They want their store back. It was funny. It was clever. It won real praise for finally admitting what everyone already knew. Audiences watched the ad, laughed, and then went on Amazon to actually buy something. The numbers behind the joke were brutal. In the first 9 months of fiscal 2014 alone, RadioShack lost nearly $400 million. 11 consecutive quarterly losses had piled up by then. An unbroken stretch of red ink. The stock, which had once touched $76, was delisted after falling below $1. On February 5th, 2015, RadioShack filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, $1.2 billion in assets against $1.39 billion in debt. the math had simply stopped working. Within weeks, more than 1,700 stores were sold off to General Wireless and Sprint for a fraction of what they were once worth. The brand that had taught a country how to build its own radios was now an asset on a spreadsheet. RadioShack didn't die once, it died in installments. After the 2015 bankruptcy, what remained limped on as a zombie brand. A joint venture with Sprint crammed it into a store-within-a-store format that satisfied no one. By 2017, the company filed for bankruptcy a second time. The remaining staff numbered around 50 people, working out of a warehouse. Then, in 2020, a new owner arrived, Retail E-commerce Ventures, run by entrepreneurs Ty Lopez and Alex Mayer. Their pitch was nostalgia as asset. Buy beloved dead brands, slap them onto an e-commerce shell, ride the name recognition. RadioShack was just one trophy in a collection that would soon include Pier 1, Dress Barn. By late 2021, the strategy curdled into something stranger. RadioShack launched its own cryptocurrency, a token called Radio, built to make the 100-year-old brand the bridge between old-world corporations and crypto's new world. The company that once manufactured its own resistors was now minting digital coins instead. None of it ever turned a profit. In September 2025, the SEC charged Lopez and Mayer with running a $112 million Ponzi scheme across their portfolio, RadioShack included. Investor money paid earlier investors. $16 million went to personal use. This was never really just about a store. It's what happens when a brand outlives the thing that made it real. RadioShack spent 60 years building things people could hold. It spent its final years selling the idea of itself to anyone who'd still believe the name. The receipt finally came due. Maybe you had one near you, a strip mall storefront, fluorescent lights, a wall of batteries by the register, and a guy behind the counter who actually knew what a capacitor was for. Tell us in the comments, what's the last thing you ever bought at a RadioShack? This channel exists to remember the things people built and then let go of without a second thought. RadioShack's death was a blueprint for the retail collapse, but they weren't the only ones stripped for parts. Click here to see our deep dive into the collapse of Toys R Us and how the joy was sold off for billions. If this is your first time here, subscribe. There are more stories like this one, and there will be more after it.